Jaxon Tippet, welcome to the show, man. Your story seems to be very, very interesting. There was a point when you were facing prison charges. From what I've gathered, attempted suicide a few times. I was hoping maybe we could dive into that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I'm an open book, and as I said, I just want this to try help someone. So, man, you can fire away whatever you want, and I'll answer exactly how I can.
Yeah, maybe you can just dive into a little bit of the prison charge first, which I think kind of led to some of the suicidal ideations and attempts too. Is that right?
Yeah, it all kind of, you know, I think, with steroids or any drugs, drugs in general affect your chemical reaction. And whether you like to say it or not, um, everyone is a different person when they're on drugs. I don't care
Yeah.
whether you say you are or you're not. I was definitely different when I was on a heavy steroid cycle as opposed to now.
Hmm.
And it's not until you kind of look back at it that you realize maybe how bad it was for you and how bad it was affecting you. Because at that
Absolutely.
point in time, when I was on, 6, 7 different compounds, I thought I was completely normal. I thought I was king shit. I was the bee's knees. I thought I was, this amazing person. But I look back and I was actually a terrible human, and I was doing it all for the wrong reasons. So that definitely contributed to me having suicidal thoughts and all the mental health side effects that it comes along with drugs that played a big part in the role of what I suffered through my journey.
Yeah, I agree. And we've had that same conversation where when I was on a lot of gear, I never thought there was anything different with me. I thought I was completely normal. But when I look back now, the only thing I can kind of relate it to is looking back at a dream where it's somebody else. Like, when you're in a dream, it's kind of like you're watching yourself do something. And that's how I look back at my time when I was using a lot of gear. I don't know if you have a similar experience.
Yeah, absolutely. But also a lot of people ask me all the time, do you regret it? Do you regret it? I don't regret it one bit because it's made me the human I am today. It's made
Hmm.
me actually help thousands of people, hopefully not go down the path that I did. I still have a lot of friends and people that they are on cycles. They do use steroids. And that's fine, but I'm not here to bash steroids. I'm not here to say get on it. I'm just here to give my personal advice, and then hopefully you make the decision to maybe not go down that path because 95% of the population does not need performance enhancing drugs to
Agreed.
maintain or have a good physique, as we just talked about with Josh. And obviously, it's going to counteract and have side effects along the way. And I pretty much say if you're not an IFBB pro or you're not someone that's wanting to become an actual pro bodybuilder, then you don't need performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah, that's exactly our message too.
Yeah.
You're going to say
And
something, Josh?
I think it's so abused here. I don't know about the USA, but it is just becoming crazy here. Like I was just in the gym before and I could have looked around and I reckon there might have been one person in the whole gym that was natural.
Yeah. I would say it's the
One.
same here too. And the funny thing is with that too is when you actually know what you're looking at, most of them, as you said, you don't even need the drugs to obtain that physique. Most of the guys who you see at the gym who you think maybe barely lift are probably running a ton of gear, probably even more than some of the IFBB pros. Because
Yeah.
we both have a lot of friends in the space, and when you actually learn what they're running, you're surprised because it's their genetics that are carrying them far in their work ethic, and they're using a little bit of drugs to supplement. And then you have the guys who are just watching YouTube videos and reading through the forums, and they're on copious amounts of gear and really not even having much to show for it.
100%. And that's where, if I could go back in time, I would change a million things. I stepped foot in the gym, and as I said, I don't know if you've heard it, but I think 3 days later, I was injecting, I think 2 to 3 compounds. And that in itself is completely against the grain. As you know, if you're a listener, you should first of all build a base, build a mind muscle connection of how to actually train and target the muscle you want, build a foundation around nutrition, sleep, and recovery. And then if you want, years later, then add in the enhancements before you know what I mean? You need to build
Yep.
all that before you actually add in the drugs. The drugs are just a byproduct.
Completely agree. Yeah, that's the exact same thing that we preach all the time. I wasn't as premature as you. I mean, I was probably 5 years in, and I still think that was too early because I still don't
Mhm.
think I learned the fundamentals of progressive overload and proper nutrition. And had I, like, Josh is the opposite, where I think that he really did have a really good foundation. And when he finally added them in, his physique flourished because of it. Where people like you and I think we were too premature, and we didn't even have the physiques that we could have had with the drugs that we used had we not, like, if we had learned those principles first.
And that's the interesting thing. I think if a lot of people listening into this, if they realize that if you actually put in the work, put in some years, build the foundation, understand nutrition and how to train properly, and then maybe you do add in just a TRT dose of testosterone or something safe like a little dose of Masteron, you're going to get a lot more out of it than if you just jump straight in the dark end and you started throwing testosterone, trenbolone in, all of these exotic drugs. And then at some stage, you're going to have to get off it anyway. And that's when you're going to suffer the rebound and the side effects and the post cycle therapy, depression, and all of those kind of things that come along with it.
Yeah. I was hoping we could kind of dive into what led you down the road to want to use performance enhanced drugs. What was the psychology going on? What was your upbringing like? Where was your mind at when you got into all that?
Man, I was just a normal teenager, just kind of coming out of school, heavily into sport like AFL and basketball, and then basically the only reason I got into gym was just my peers and my colleagues. They were all doing it. It was kind of like around that time where, you know, I was I wanted to be popular. I wanted to impress the ladies. I wanted to look good, and that was all that was on my mind, to be honest. I just wanted to
Mhm.
be popular, looking good. I wanted everyone to be like, when I walked down the street, I wanted their heads to turn, and that was
Right.
literally what was on my mind.
Yeah.
So to do that, I started gym. Obviously, I wanted to get bigger. I wanted to be a bit leaner, look a bit better, enhance my physique, and that's what I did. And then what I started to realize is that there was these things called steroids, and you know, obviously they obviously my goal in the gym was to get bigger, get leaner, get stronger. And then what I realized is that steroids do this, but at a very amplified rate. So I was like, well, if I'm spending this much time in the gym and I could maybe put on, say, 2 kilos of lean muscle naturally over 2 years, but I could put on 2 kilos of lean muscle in a few months on these drugs, well, then it's a no-brainer. I'm going to put it in my body.
Right.
So I literally just started using it. And, as you know yourself, it is a very addictive drug. You do feel great at the start when you're on it. The
Mhm.
pumps are insane, the endorphins, the sex drive, all of these things that come along with it. They're great at the start. But what I realized is that down the track, I just got so addicted that I actually got to the point where I couldn't get off the drug. I had to just use it day after day after day, year after year with no break.
Right. Me too. Yeah, I think I did my first cycle with a post cycle therapy, maybe second one with a post cycle therapy. And then after that, I just never really came off, and it was always adding more and more and more and more and more, until, like I joked before we hopped on, like I was literally at the point where I too was like Boston Loy is doing 3cc injections, which is insane to me now, because I'll use, like, now my TRT is like, 20 units, so like zero point 0.2 cc's an injection 3 times a week. I can't believe I was, loading up a 3cc syringe and jabbing that in my shoulder. It's insane.
Yeah. And what I realized is that, less is actually more. Like you can
Mhm.
you can build a very, very good physique, even just off a testosterone replacement dose, like a 200 milligrams of testosterone a week, maybe 1 to 2 IUs of HGH. If you're, over the age of 35, that's all you need. And I've talked
Mhm.
to some of the best in the world, some of the pros, and majority of the year, that's all they're using besides comp prep, which is, maybe 8 weeks out of a whole year, they might add in a couple more compounds or, a fat burning drug or an anti-estrogen. But majority of the time, that's all the pros are on.
Hmm. Exactly. So
And then
what?
we've got, 18-year-olds in the gym and girls that are using more than that.
I know, it's insane. So you got into it all just to try to look good and kind of, get the girls and be popular. And then when did things kind of start going south for you? Like when did you get in trouble with the law and when did all that start? Because I would assume there was probably like, some event that happened and then kind of started to snowball.
Yeah, I think it was just, with time, with the drugs in my body, they started to really take a toll on my health and my
Yeah.
mental state. I think about 2 to 3 years in is when it all started to, my liver was taking a heavy toll. My kidneys were taking a beating. I was having heart issues. I was in and out of hospital.
Mm.
Um, and then my mental side of things just went a little bit weird because I realized that, I had to get off at some stage and I couldn't get off. And then that led to body dysmorphia and that led me to actually having eating disorder problems where I actually became anorexic. And
Me too.
then, oh man, it was actually hell. And then, yourself, body image it's crazy, man. And the fact that I was starting to blow up on social media, and all of these type of things, all I was doing was comparing myself to the best of the best around the world. So I was comparing myself to the top end fitness models, the top end physiques, and basically, I couldn't get to that point or that physique without the steroids. So it was kind of like a toxic trait that it just kept me injecting and injecting them, even though it was actually counteracting my health and my relationship with my family and all of these type of things.
Hmm. And when did you get in trouble with the law and how did that all go down? If you can talk about it.
Yeah, so I got in trouble with the law probably 4 years in until the final 6 years. So I was on steroids for about 6 years straight. And I was just, as I said, it affects your chemical reaction, and I wasn't thinking straight when I was on it. And I just thought everything was normal. I thought everything I was doing was completely fine. Basically, at that time, I was living with my parents, and they were very suspicious as they saw me obviously getting bigger at a very rapid rate. So they didn't want me on steroids. They didn't want me on drugs. So I actually had to hide the steroids. So me not thinking straight, I just, threw the vials in my bag, threw the tablets in my bag, my gym bag, and that's where they stayed. And, one day after gym, just a random Monday afternoon, I was driving home and the cops pulled me over and they, obviously I'm heavily tattooed. So they got very suspicious and they searched my car and, without luck, they found a bunch of steroids and some Anavar and some clenbuterol. And, it wasn't that bad. Like I got a slap on the wrist. I think I got a fine and that was it. So what
Mm,
did I do? The next day I threw them back in my bag.
of course.
Because I was like, oh, I didn't really, nothing really happened, I'm kind of like almost, I kind of almost felt invincible because I was like, well, if that's all that happens, with these drugs, then I don't care if I get caught again, what's a
Hmm.
fine? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I put them back in, I got caught again. And it was a little bit worse. Like, I think there was, I can't remember off the top of my head what I actually got out of it. I had to go to court and stuff like that. And then once again, I didn't really get anything bad. Like I didn't go to jail. Like the fine wasn't too hefty. So I did the exact same thing again. And a few months later, I literally got caught. Obviously, I was red hot on the radar by then. So they knew my number plate. They knew me. As soon as they saw my car, they pulled me over and they searched me. And that was the big one. With anything in life, if you have three offenses with anything, let alone a class one drug, it's pretty much guaranteed prison time. Um, So that was the one that really led me to a lot of hefty court fees. I think I paid up to 60 grand in total through lawyer fees to try fight this end case, which I was pretty much guaranteed to go to jail. At this point in time, I was 21 years old. So as you know, I've got the world ahead of me, everything ahead of me. I was in incredible shape. I had so much ahead of me. I had amazing parents, and I pretty much thought I was going to jail. So I thought there was nothing, there was no point of in living anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
I couldn't think of anything worse than sitting in a cell for maybe 5, 10 years, whatever that may be, because of this thing. So at that final court case I attended, I obviously stood up. The judge went there. He said his words, and he basically said, Jackson, we, we are going to give you another chance based off everything. Obviously, this is just very in short, based
Yeah.
off everything that I said and the way that I structured it. Basically, he gave me another chance,
Wow.
and I don't believe it was the judge. I am very, very religious. I'm very into God and Jesus, and I wasn't until that point in time. But the only thing I can think of, and what I know was the case, is that God was looking over me. He saw more light in me. He saw maybe the fact of what I'm doing now, and he saw the fact that I was going to transition into that. And ever since that court case, I felt like God was looking over me. He gave me a second chance to, actually remove this drug from my life and make a better life out of, the person I am. And ever since that day, after that court case, I've never touched steroids. I've never gone down that road. And all I've done since then is tried to help people with drug addiction, steroids, and overcoming problems.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. There was another time too, I believe, when you said you attempted suicide and failed, and you thought there was some divine intervention too, as well, right?
Yeah, so this is very raw, but I did attempt suicide. I tried to hang myself. I tried twice. Um, Man, all I can think of once again is God. He didn't want me to, obviously take my life, and the rope actually slipped, and actually, like, how do you explain it? The rope broke, like it
Hmm.
broke when it, and man, I can't think of anything else but God was looking over me. And how does that happen? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
Right.
one in a million chances that that happens, and it's just all these little life occurrences that have built up, and it's like, man, there's just, I don't know, there's just so much ahead of me. And ever since then, I've just been so passionate in trying to help people overcome problems and mental health and all of these things, because there's so many people suffering out there that I want them to realize that there's so much more ahead in your life, regardless if you're 20 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old, that anyone can turn their life around. And I'm a big believer in that. If you feel like you're going through hell right now, or you're listening, or there's no point of living, I want you to know that there is, and there's someone that cares for you, and there is so much more ahead in life, and you can turn your life around no matter what.
Powerful, man.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we
Thank
can
you
get
for sharing.
into, yeah, maybe we can get into the rest of that on the next episode. I know we're limited for time here. So I think that's a
Absolutely.
really good
I
intro
would I
to
would
you.
love to go
Beautiful.
deep into how people can, you know, gain help. And just maybe we could even put up a questionnaire of what people want to hear, and maybe problems they're going through. And I'd love to try and give my aspect and my point of view into helping people overcome those problems.
Sure, absolutely. Well, until that time, where can people find you, Jackson?
Yeah, they're just, my Instagram is my best handle. I am Jaxon Tippet is all one word. I'm sure you'll leave it in the handles. And
Absolutely.
my website is on there, which has my own podcast on there, which is the I Am Me podcast.
Hmm.
I started that basically to help people, and basically just spread awareness. And I've got over 250 episodes. And I'm just basically, honored that I can come on, the likes of your podcast now and just spread the message to the world. I think there's so much to be talked about, and it's great to collaborate with people from the other side of the world, and you never know what could happen out of this. So I really appreciate you having me on in such short notice, and hopefully we can get another one out there. And I'd love to get you two on mine, and we can talk about your back end story about performance enhancing drugs.
Absolutely, man. Well, you have a really powerful story, and I'm so excited to dive even more into it. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your night, our morning, and we'll see you guys soon on the next episode of this one, and watch us over on Jaxon's podcast too.